streaming here on Zoom. Brian, you've had 26 years of play-by-play experience, and now you are, you got to join this match for charity. What was that experience like? And when you got the call, what were you thinking?
Golly, right away, you make me feel really old. So you probably aren't even around that long. But yes, I've been at it a long time. And this was interesting. It was great. It was really cool and it's fun to be a part of. And fortunately, my Golf Channel experience, we did a lot of these made-for-TV events. As I like to say, we were the tree that falls in the forest, though, back in those days. Nobody listened and nobody cared. We were broadcasting for the tens back in the Canadian Tour days. But we did do a lot of these events with players mic'd up, and we had the heart rate monitors going. So mechanically, it was all very similar. Obviously, bigger stakes, higher profile individuals competing. But it was great. It's great to be back in golf. I love doing it. I was, fortunate enough to do the PGA Championship for 4 years with Turner Sports. And that was kind of my entry back into golf after 4 years of Golf Channel. So really enjoyed being with everybody and being a part of a show that raised $20 million. I know you guys have talked about it, but that just still is mind-boggling in one afternoon to raise that kind of money that is going right into play. I mean, as we speak, these are meals that are being delivered. These are payments that are being made to help small businesses and just all the charities that were involved. It's a really cool thing.
Yeah, and you got to work with Jeff Newbar, so I'm sure that was
for sure
a bonus.
I didn't know how fast we were getting into the suck up on the producer, but since he's here, we might as well just point him out that he did a fabulous job quarterbacking the whole thing. He had a lot on his plate, and it's not an easy transition. It's not necessarily live golf, and it's not necessarily edited golf. It's plausibly live, and everything we're doing is happening, but there's a lot of planning and preparation and mapping out of and structure that has to be engaged there. And Jeff was awesome.
No comment.
I don't even know what to say. You know what's so funny, BA, is like, it's already Thursday. I still have no idea what day it is, because they're all the same around here when you're kind of in quarantine land, right? But it was kind of actually that there was about 4 or 5 hours where things felt kind of normal. And that's kind of almost been kind of the strange thing, at least for me coming back, is like, you're done with it. And, you're in a TV truck and you're doing television and, like Steve Bime came by here yesterday and we chatted, and it was, like there's certain things, but we had a little bit more normal when we were down in Florida, other than the biblical rain, which was crazy. I have not been, watched it back. I'm going to, one thing I definitely, for me, right off the bat, your line about feeding Chuck just kind of put it all in the right tone. And for me, that made me, because, let's not lie, the hour and a half leading up to 3 o'clock was slightly stressful, in terms of having all 4 players say to us, like, when are we teeing off? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not the weatherman. And then we finally made that decision of when they were going to tee off. And that kind of started the dominoes. You and Trevor and Chuck were inside the clubhouse when we made the decision to bring you guys out to the world's largest umbrella. And that started that going. But when you had that line about feeding Chuck, that kind of just made everybody in the truck smile, relax, and realize we're just doing TV. It's not rocket science.
Yeah, it was extremely normal. And then I think it was cool that everybody did, we're all trying to protect each other too. So there were the social distancing measures in place and all the CDC protocols. And I thought everybody treated that really seriously, and that was good too. We had the nurses station when we showed up every day. We were tested a couple of times while we were there. So, I think without that piece of it, and I know that was a big part of it, and there was a lot of planning that was involved in that to make sure, behind the curtain, that we all felt safe, and all the staff and all the crew felt like they were comfortable in their workplace. Once that box was checked, then we could kind of get back to normal. And, one of the marvels of that day, and I know you're a kind of a techie nerd like me, Jeff, but the fact that everything worked, I mean, minus the blimp and minus a couple of the cart cameras, and we had a few glitches with the RF equipment, but I try to just remind people that as intimate as that felt from the users end, from the audience end, to be able to just feel like you're eavesdropping on this really cool foursome of just legends, that was very intentional, and we wanted to give it that. But the fact that all of that worked, and the way we were able to present that was with wireless technology, wireless microphones, wireless earpieces, wireless cameras that that are in the carts. And so those are 3 things right there for each player. And for all of that to just function in somewhat usable level, and actually probably minus a couple of microphones, I thought it was just a miracle that everybody pulled it off from the engineering side, knowing that we were ready to pivot at any time. If the stuff didn't work, we had a plan for that too, but thank goodness we didn't have to go there, which would have been what, plan D. Where were we at with the plans? We were like plan A. Plan A was out the window Saturday, and then plan B, C, maybe D or F. Yeah.
I showed it on the show the other day, BA, and then let's get some of your guys' user questions. I literally had about 80 pages of paperwork in front of me that is all marked up and everything. And it was like, okay, if this happens, then go to this page. If this happens, go to that page, just with different contingencies for things, kind of not working.
And Jeff would always say, now, if you'll just turn to page 87 on your format,
exactly.
as I'm sitting in the rain, with, but no, it was all good. It had to be that way. We had the contingency plans that were all in place. We could easily navigate from one place to the other. So that was one of the things you and Steve did really well, that for announcers, we know we're about to be in front of a bunch of people, but to know that side's kind of locked down that's comforting to know that that's in place and everybody knows where they're going, and you're not just going to be walking out on a plank and maybe jumping off the ship at that point.
Yeah, you guys are definitely in good hands. And like Jeff said, we are live on Facebook, on YouTube, on Periscope. So if you guys have questions, you can send them in and we'll ask Brian. But my own question, you've been doing play-by-play for the Brewers. You've done basketball with TNT. How does it change your job when people are mic'd up? That's a totally different integration for you.
Yeah, well, the NBA is the best at it, and we have great access on the NBA on TNT. We mic players. I mean, LeBron James has worn a microphone for us in a playoff series. So when the best player does it, players are usually willing to do that. Every game we do in the NBA, both coaches are wearing microphones. Greg Popovich famously turns his off at certain times, which is actually a good thing for America. But for the most part, the NBA is the best. Major League Baseball is probably the worst. And, trying to get access to those players with wireless microphones is a constant struggle for us. I still do the Milwaukee Brewers, and I'm part of the regional sports network package of that team. You're starting to see things like in the MLB All-Star game, though, players are not only wearing microphones, but also the IFB, the earpieces. And that was the one thing we brought to the match, which kind of changed the playing field. The confessional piece, where not only could they talk to us and listen to us, we could talk to them. They could bust on the announcers. I mean, what player doesn't want to shine the announcers if things aren't, being said properly? And so, and we had that with Barkley and Brady. So that was kind of the next level piece. I think our equipment is getting better. It's getting less obtrusive, and hopefully we can get to the point where, even the stuff that these guys wore this past Sunday, they're not going to wear that in competition. It's just not realistic, but it does present the idea that you can get there. And I will say this, back in those Golf Channel days, you don't necessarily need mic'd up players. I think that's important to note. It's cool to have them mic'd up, but if we can be out there and be trusted, we meaning the broadcast group, be trusted with microphones, boom mics, and we can hear almost anything that is happening on a golf course. And so just kind of breaking down those barriers of distrust, and as opposed to us just covering an event and covering athletes, if we can be more collaborative, which was what this was all the way around, from the competitors to the broadcasters to production, then we can develop a little more trust and have better sound and bring you inside. Now, the earpieces and being able to talk and the confessional side of it, that's something I really would love to explore moving forward, whether that's confessional stations, because basically those golf carts proved to be a confessional booth. That's what it was. And that's when they were most comfortable talking to us and having that feedback. But I would like to explore that more. We used to do walk and talks at Golf Channel. We used to, say on a par 5, when there was, say, a backup on a par 5, you knew there were guys are going for it in 2. So we would set up microphones and have a headset or an on-course reporter, and we try to get a little more interactive that way. But that to me was the biggest takeaway, that we can now pursue back and forth in the middle of a competition if players are willing to do that.
How much of that do you think is building relationships with these guys? You know, in journalism, it used to be a really common thing that lots of the people who were announcing or, you know, writing about athletes had built relationships over time. Do you think that's going to be important in order to get there?
Yeah, it's huge, but it's not just, it's gone past the, oh, hey, let's put a microphone on because Brian Anderson is a friend of his and he'll do it. That's not what it is anymore. This event was different. Obviously, Jeff and Phil know each other really well. So, you know, Phil is more connected to what we're trying to do on the broadcasting side. And we have those moments where we can present certain ideas and not have so many people just beat that down before they would even hear it. So back in the day when we were doing golf events and we had all this cool technology and trying all these things like the heart rate monitor and the microphones, and we couldn't get anywhere with that. I mean, the PGA Tour wouldn't let us even think about even using that on the Nationwide Tour back in those days, which is now the Korn Ferry Tour. So it was great, and we proved we could do it, and we had great relationships with those guys. But unless the league buys in and unless the top players are willing to do it, it's not going anywhere. So then it becomes a relationship that's on way higher levels than play-by-play guy and producer. So that's really the next wave of it. They have to trust that we're not going to embarrass them. They can embarrass themselves, but in the NBA, we record mostly everything. We don't use anything live, and there's usually an NBA representative in the truck. So they're kind of clearing all of this, and that's probably where that's going to have to start. Somebody who's representing the leagues, clearing everything that's being aired.
Cool. Grant wants to know, where does this rank on events that you've called?
I mean, it's one of the best events I've called. I mean, it's one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of. It's, I mean, I've called a no-hitter in the playoffs for TBS. I've called amazing performances in the NBA. I've called March Madness moments, and those are all just, I would just call more traditional broadcasts where you're calling a sport and you're there for the plays and the players. But this is something totally different, and what really matters to me about this event was just the collaboration from everybody, the competitors, the broadcasters, the production team. We're all just kind of pulling on the same rope, and I love that part of it. And you know, I love the teamwork aspect of it and how everybody just kind of decreased individually so others could increase as a whole, and we all had our windows where we had to deliver. You know, if you think about it like a batting order, we all have our spot in the lineup, and when your time's at the plate, you gotta take your shot. But when your time's not at the plate, that was the time to lay low and be quiet and help others and encourage others. And that was the way it was all the way around, from the competitors to us. And that's really why it's one of the best things I've ever been a part of, because it was, at the end of the day, it was like, damn, we just pulled off something pretty cool. And everybody checked egos and we made it happen. Even though there were alpha dogs all over the place, everybody was there kind of for the same reason. And that was to entertain and put on a great show and raise a lot of money.
Well, that's a really great point. You know, broadcasts are a huge team effort. We always say, like, especially after, you know, Jeff or I has the chance to work on one, it's important to highlight that there's so many people coming together to make this happen. And at least from your side on the announcer front, like, chemistry is really important with the people that you're working with as well. Was there someone you were looking forward to working with, maybe you don't get to see often, that was on your team?
Yeah, all of them. I mean, all the guys. I work with Chuck. I've never been next to Chuck. So even though I do games on TNT, he's in the studio and we have some cross pollination there coming back from half times or whatever. And I've been in a lot of events with him, not off the air, you know, not on the broadcast. But I was looking forward to that and working with Chuck and eye contact with him. And he's a brilliant guy. I mean, he kind of plays the dummy every now and then, but he's super sharp and he's really funny, and he is what he is, exactly the way he is on the air, he is off the air. Trevor Immelman and I have done a number of PGA championships together. So, you know, we had kind of talked prior to the event that if you're thinking of this as a band, Trevor and I basically agreed that, okay, Trevor, you're the drummer, I'll be the bass player, and we'll try to keep time with the announcers and let them be the lead singers and the lead guitarists that are up front and are the ones that are going viral on all these things. And that's exactly the way that happened. So I give Trevor a lot of credit. He's a great analyst. In my opinion, the next real great analyst, like a lead analyst potential. And he kind of checked his ego to step back. He was there when we really needed golf moments. And that made it work because he was always there as kind of that drummer to keep perfect time. And when we needed to get into the competition, he was ready for that. So I was really looking forward to working with him again. I like him a lot. We spent a lot of time on the golf course, even though we didn't need to. We didn't have to know every inch of Medalist, but that's the way he rolls. That's why he won a Masters, and he wanted to learn every inch of it. So I went out with him, and we just talked shop and life and broadcasting and everything. So he's a good friend, and I enjoy being around him. He makes everybody better, and I appreciate that about him.
You know, you tweeted that when Phil drove the 14th green and everything kind of like came together, right? Like the shot tracer, the audio, like everything was there. Phil's personality was there. I'll ask both of you, Jeff and Brian, like, was that your favorite moment when you saw everything come together, or was there something else maybe that we're overlooking?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I don't know. I mean, for me, my favorite moment is that we finished, because there was a brief, moment there where on like the 13th tee where I'm like, wow, I'm doing the math in my head. If this thing goes 18, I'm going to be like 5 minutes after the sunset. So my favorite moment was 4 guys standing there with a $20 million check for 2 reasons. One, because we raised $20 million, and that's just a kudos to everybody who watched and all the corporate support who donated to make that important. But having them finish was really important, because I had this weird vision at one point where I'm like, you don't root when you're in the truck. You just don't. I may have been rooting for someone to close it out on 16 at one point, because that would have been for light. Because remember, even with all the cloud cover, it was going to get dark even quicker. And BA can say it. So I'm looking at these monitors of these beautifully painted cameras of the golf, and it looks light. But then right below them, I had 3 individual cameras of BA, Trevor, and Chuck, and it's pitch black. And they're maybe separated by about 100 yards. So I knew how dark it was, and I'm just glad that that was my favorite moment, was finishing.
Sounds like a truck dweller right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did like those moments that you referenced, Lexi, because for me and I, when everything comes together that way and you have those moments. So imagine we've had all these conversations, and Jeff started on this way before I even got involved, and just you're constantly pouring through where the opportunities are to have a moment, and you don't know that. And we may have had 50 ideas where a moment could have happened, but 11 was one of them. And it's a drivable par 4 for a reason. Those tees are up there for a reason. That was all pre-planned too. And then for Phil to basically tell Brady that I don't care what you hit, I'm going to go hit a driver no matter what. Mm-hmm. But to me, that was like the shot tracer, the cart cam, the microphone that he's wearing, the IFB that he's listening to us, his reaction when he got to the green, he's got the catchphrase. The whole picture was like everything we all wanted to have happen in one sequence. Now, I would say the same thing on all those, maybe minus the shot tracer, but everything else happened that way with the Brady Charles Barkley interaction before he holed out at 7. So those are probably the 2 moments that stand out the most. And I'm sure fans would have other moments in mind, but for me, just because of the technology and how everything worked, and when you have a plan and you're hoping to capture some of this stuff, and then it works, it's like, oh yeah, great. Now let's go to commercial now. We can all take a breath. So this is really good.
How much insight did you have to Tom Brady and Peyton Manning's game before this all started? I mean, obviously with the weather, everything kind of goes out the window, but just curious.
We had a lot of insight to Brady because he must have hit 1,000 balls in 3 days, and he probably played 36 holes in the 2 days leading up to it. I mean, he played a lot of golf and hit a lot of golf balls. So we definitely saw a lot of his swing, and we've seen those two show up in public with their golf game at the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am and various events like that. Peyton's played a lot of golf with Tiger in the various Pro-Ams around the PGA Tour. So, I mean, we had a little bit of an idea, but to get out there and see him play in the practice rounds, and the weather was beautiful Friday and Saturday. So we felt like we knew Peyton wasn't going to miss right. I mean, we knew that. He was going to be slinging some hooks out there all day long. And then Brady was a bit of a wild card, right, Jeff? I mean, he hasn't been playing much. He's been training ready for a football season. So I think that was the huge concern, was that Brady was going to be all over the map, and he was in the beginning.
Well, it was kind of funny because there were a lot of different instructors on Twitter, great instructors, who were giving criticisms to Tom Brady's game. They were saying the ball position was wrong, the hands were wrong, the spine angle was wrong, and all I would say to them is yes, all of the above. Which is why one of my favorite exchanges between Phil and Tom was the second shot on 17. I don't know what Tom said, whether it was 2-iron or 5-iron or something. Phil just literally said, take a 7-iron and keep it on the grass. And I think what Phil really meant was just keep it on planet Earth, because I can reach the green with the third shot no matter where you hit it, unless you put it in some strange area. I loved the fact that Tom Brady, we finally saw something he can't do. But then, of course, just like Tom Brady, he had moments where he rose above it and contributed. I mean, the fact that those guys played under par on the backside an alternate shot. I mean, you go through Ryder Cup pairings of two greats, both professional golfers, and they don't shoot even par in alternate shot. And these guys went under par. Mm-hmm. That's insane. That's insane. So Tom Brady's a gamer. Really cool. Yeah, Tom Brady's a gamer when he wants it. The other thing that was really fun is, I'll just leave you with this, Lex, is Chuck and Tom Brady were both on property Sunday morning. One of them was running wind sprints in the parking lot. Guess who it was and who it wasn't.
Oh my gosh.
And the other was eating donuts. Remember, we had a moment there though, and I forgot how it got resolved, but I think Jeff kind of put the nix on it. But Trevor Immelman was like, oh man, I really want to help Brady. Can you open me up? I want to give him a quick lesson. I can fix his game right now. And we're going, I know. Ooh, how would that go over? What if he's worse? So
that's what I was gonna say. Like, do you even, I don't know. I don't like to take like advice or whatever when I'm out on the course, just because I'm worried it's gonna mess me up for the end. I'm like, save it until my round is done.
I don't know. I don't know if there was enough advice that could have been given other than have Phil Mickelson as your partner, because when you have Phil as your partner, great things are going to happen. And, I think that Phil left it feeling really good that they got it to only, such a great comeback and only lost one down, right? With kind of what we saw there. Because Peyton Manning, I mean, he's a stick.
Yeah, no kidding. One other thing just about the weather. I mean, we've talked about it a few times, that it was like downpouring. And when you're in TV, you have a lot of rain delays, especially in sports like baseball. Brian, how do you plan to fill those times? Is it like a per game, per sport thing? What are you going to talk about if all else?
Oh my God. I'm the king of rain delays. I'm lucky in Milwaukee. We have a retractable roof. So that's one of my favorite things about Miller Park and working with the Brewers. But I've done a lot in rain delays in my baseball life. I've done play-by-play of a tarp pull. In my golf life, we got rained out in Richmond, Virginia one year, and it was sunny enough. Like there was like one par 3 that was still available, and we literally went on the air on the Golf Channel and did a par 3 competition and a fishing show with Boo Weekly. So I've done a lot of like rain delay material, and that was probably one of my highlights when we did the par 3 contest at the Henrico County Open. And Boo then took us to a pond, and we did a fishing show. And you can imagine, like we put banjo music in, and Boo Weekly, as you know, could totally host a fishing show. And he's talking about gigging frogs and catching fish, and he caught a little bass. And so we were ready, whatever it was going to be. I mean, I think smartly, Jeff and the crew, we recorded a bunch of what happened the day before. So we did an audition, kind of a rehearsal, to make sure the players, the competitors, were comfortable with the wiring and the carts and all that. So of course we recorded all of that, and I think that was available. I know the previous match was available to go to. You talk to Jeff, he was producing, but I don't think we would have just been sitting there waxing for hours. Now, we might have done some interviews and we had a rain room set up, but we weren't just going to like tell stories and have Charles Barkley tell stories from his NBA past.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the challenge there was only a limited amount of light, right? So even starting at 3:00, which was clearly the right move, but we only had about an hour and 10 minutes to play with. of a delay before we were not going to be able to finish 18 holes, assuming it went all 18 holes. That's the beauty of match play, is someone could, close it out pretty early. So we had different options. The rehearsal the day before was spectacular. At some point, BA, someone's going to have to air that, because there were some really great moments in there, and things that we were lucky enough to see. But yeah, the challenge of all live outdoor, because you just don't know how long. The best forecast in the morning called for rain between 1 and 2. And there was a deluge between 1 and 2. And then they kind of said, because it was coming from the south, that we would have a window, around 5 o'clock, which should be good for a while. And it was, but there were a few pretty heavy downpours during that window, as Amanda talked about the other day, that the players and everyone had to deal with.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I haven't worked a ton of rain delays. All of mine, I was luckily in studio. So
Well, when you work for the Padres, Lex, you have a rain delay every decade.
Yeah, I know. I was part of one of our longest ones, and happened to be, it was a West Coast game. I don't remember what it was. They all kind of melded together, but it was a long night. Brian, Luke wants to know how your golf game is.
Well, it's I thought it was pretty good. So I was really jonesing to play golf after the match. And I got home, and it's a beautiful sunny day. I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a little town outside called Heartland. I live on a golf course, and I'm thinking, okay, this is Monday. I'll go out, maybe play a few holes. This will be great. I'll walk. My family, my wife and daughter, they're out doing stuff. So perfect. I'll go play 9 holes or whatever. I played 2 holes. I lost 6 balls, and I literally, I went down 1 hole where I live, came back on the par 5, and I said, nope, straight up the hill. Put my clubs away. I said, that's it. I'm not even going to go any further. But normally I play to about a 5 handicap. So if I play well, I'll break 80 typically, is where, I'll shoot in the 70s. If I don't play well, I'll shoot in the 80s. But when I started at Golf Channel, I went from a 15 handicap to a 3. That's as good as I've ever gotten. I think a 2.7 index. But I had all these instructions from Kurt Byram, who learned from Ken Venturi. So it literally went from Ken Venturi to Kurt Byram to me, which is a total waste of instruction. But Michael Breed was on our crew back then. Before he was a famous instructor, he was our on-course announcer, and Kay Cockrell and Jerry Foltz. And I must have gotten $100,000 worth of lessons from those guys. I do remember being on a practice tee at an event, and Trip Eisenhower was hitting balls after his round, and I was dead shanking him, almost wiped him out. So I think my colleagues were so embarrassed of my golf game at that point that they made it a point the rest of the year to, every day after we signed off, we would go hit balls or we would play golf. And actually I got really good, and I'm not that good anymore. I can't shoot par every time, but I'll shoot in the 70s typically.
Well, good news is we know some people who can send you some golf balls, so don't let that discourage
nice.
You. Don't let that.
I'm gonna need some. I need 6 for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I as long as Brady didn't lose all of them, we'll find some and send some your way.
I was gonna say, it was Jeff's goal at the start of the year to bring me to a single-digit handicap, but we'll see if that happens. Toys of Arkham on YouTube wants to know if you've ever been to Ireland and what the toughest course you've ever played is.
I have not, so that takes me out of that. I've never been. It's always baseball season, doesn't fit with going to Ireland to play golf. It's usually a little too cold after the season ends. So that's always been out of my realm of possibility.
Yeah, I went last year with Royal Portrush, with a piece of content up there with Golden Tate, wide receiver for the New York Giants, where he was trying to see how he would do over there, and I got to play it the day before. And let's just say that golf course is really, really hard.
I can't even imagine. Yeah, so Brian, this is usually your really busy time of year, I would assume, right? Spring training, March Madness, opening day, and possibly the NBA playoffs, right?
Yeah, I would have finished the NBA playoffs, my version of the NBA playoffs. So I go through the conference finals, and then Marv Albert handles the conference finals for Turner. So yeah, when we get into the spring, so from late February into mid-May, is as busy as I am all year. I'll probably do half of the events that I do for the year in that window of time. So yeah, I would have been back with the Brewers at this point and getting ready for Sunday MLB on TBS, which would have started July 5th. So this would have actually been a nice window where I would have just been traveling with the Brewers, doing Brewers games in a long stretch. So I'm pretty busy most of the year, and the baseball schedule eats up a lot of that, but I do about 150 events a year, and 90 of those are Brewers games. But yeah, I would have just been coming off a really busy stretch.
Well, I think we're all really glad that you had the time to come and do this match. And a lot of people do want to know what is in store for match 3. And Jeff has said we can't say, but ideally, what would
we
you
can't
like
say
to
because we
see
don't
for
know.
the third? I know, but you have ideas. You don't want to.
He's got a lot of ideas. We've been pitching ideas forever,
Yeah.
but first of all, like I do want to say that it was great to be a part of the match, and I'm glad I was there. But I do want to mention, and we did this during the broadcast, that's Ernie Johnson's chair. And Ernie, you know, he has a son to take care of, and that's why he wasn't there. And so that's why I was able to do it, and probably wouldn't have done it had it been normal times. That said, moving forward, everybody that I've spoken with at Turner Sports, they're in for it. You guys know there's a contract in place that calls for 3. So I'm sure they want to keep that going. And because of the ratings, they're going to want to do it, and they're going to want to keep it going as long as we can continue to bring great talent. And if Phil and Tiger, of course, are interested, then of course we're going to be interested from a network's perspective. But I can't imagine it not coming back in some way. But it was a lot of fun. I think we're going to have a very hard time replicating what just happened. So that was kind of everything. Even the rain made it interesting, more interesting. So I'm sure all parties are wanting a part of it. But when ratings come out like this, as I've been saying, everybody who's got a finger in the pie, they have a whole hand in the pie right now. So there's a lot of people to negotiate around and navigate to actually make it happen. And Jeff and I would not be on that list of the folks at the table to actually do that at this point.
Well, we will just have to see. I just like to hear all the possibilities. I'm a big thinker. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Jeff, what is happening next Tuesday?
So BA, you'll like this. Right in the start of the second segment of the match, we ran a little feature on David Barber, who's a doctor, frontline worker who has a blog out about kind of all his exploits in the game of golf. Well, he's going to join the podcast on Tuesday. We did something kind of cool after watching that piece, BA. We set him up for something we're doing now called a distance fitting, which anyone can do if they go to CallawayGolf.com/distance fitting, where one of our head fitters or one of our professional fitters will call you and kind of dial you into a new set of clubs. Well, Mr. Barber's getting a complimentary set of clubs for all the work he's done on the front lines from Callaway, cool. Which is pretty awesome. So we're going to have him on Tuesday morning. It's an early show for me, so I'll have to actually wake up one day. And we will go through kind of his story, because I know it's the first time I saw that piece, I was pretty inspired. And I know you were too, BA. So excited to have him on Tuesday.
Jeff, will you mind doing that show, laying down on your couch, looking up at your Emmy Award? And I feel like that's in a place where you can just.
I could try.
I've always liked the scavenger hunt in the background, and that's a very well placed trophy right there. Well, I can imagine you laying there.
There's one thing that after we sign off air and Jen tells me that we're official out there that I got to show you before we hang up, that we'll be going in that same corner soon, but not quite ready for prime time.
Okay, right. I love it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, BA. If everyone who's watching now wants to tune in on Tuesday, get up bright and early, set your alarm clocks. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasts. And Jeff, we'll see you next Tuesday.